All right, hello and welcome to AutisticPod. You are here for a very special episode. I'm very excited to have somebody that I found on Threads again, and then I saw her posts and found her on Medium.com, where she has some tremendous papers, and I'm here to just share her with the world, get her message out. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk.
Excellent. Well, tell us what are the conclude. You just go. You're here. You're the guest.
Yeah.
Explain. Explain how you see things and what just go.
Yeah, let me try to give a brief overview of how I got here. So I was born and raised in the religious faith of Jehovah's Witnesses, and only recently left that context fully. That type of exit takes that's a gradual journey, I guess, but fully, removed myself from that context only a few years ago. And I was really determined upon exiting that context to find some bridge that reconciles the spiritual and the scientific, because humans have a yearning for the spiritual, but we also want it to make logical sense. And I just feel like we wouldn't yearn for that if there wasn't a solution, it wasn't a bridge. And there's the old saying that, like, whatever question you inhabit fully enough, you eventually become the answer to. And so that's the work that I'm doing. What is that bridge? How can I help embody the bridge between spirit and science without it being woo, in ways that can be measurable, that aren't pseudoscientific? My first degree was in translating, interpreting, and language, and so I'm very fascinated with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is basically a hypothesis that states that language shapes reality. And so I'm looking at that in the intersection of the brain, how people experience reality, how language shapes consciousness, and how does that tie into human development and specifically evolution, which I think is very critical for where we are currently in our collective journey in the stream of time, given the chaos and complexity of the environment in which we live. So, all of that to say, I'm a systems theorist and a consciousness researcher and a language access expert.
Excellent. Just the ADHD thing and maybe something distracting. I meant to tell you before we
Oh,
started recording. Put your mic down just a touch because you're
oh
getting a
yeah.
little. Yeah, you're getting a little pop.
Thank you.
That might be better. You're very welcome.
Is it
So
better
yes,
now?
yes, that is better, I think.
Okay, good.
So yes, so keep going. So that is your history. That is what
Yeah.
motivated you. So what are you preaching? What have you know explain
Yeah.
your passion.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when I left that context, it was, I mean, I say it with kind of a casual air now, but I was born in that, raised in it, I grew up in it. Um, I, like you mentioned, have always been regarded as a very intense person, always a little too much for everyone. One of my former bosses told me, "You're like the sun." I mean, I love being, in the realm of
Work.
your sunshine, but
Mhm.
sometimes I
Mhm.
need sunglasses. It's too much, and so, like, always grew up with the pain of that. But then I also, whatever I put my hand to, I overdo according to other people. I approach everything with intensity. But it's like, well, if I care enough to do it, why wouldn't I be intense about it? And so when it came to the religion, I was very intense about it. I was a true believer. And then I started to see contradictions and inconsistencies that didn't sit right with me, and um, that eventually caused me to wake up is what people who have left that context call it. But when you do that, you are literally shattering your own reality. You are shattering your framework for existence, because a religion, especially a religion that is that consuming, is your entire world. It is the scaffolding for how your brain maps reality, makes sense of reality, navigates reality. And so when I left that
God the
context,
answer to everything. Just God.
yeah, I was
Just
like, who am I?
like you
What
said,
am
you're
I
God.
doing here? Yeah. It was like all of the big questions that the average person grapples with from the time of their youth. Like I didn't grapple with because I had all the answers, packaged and handed to me. And then it was like, oh my God, I don't know who I am. I don't know how to make sense of reality. I don't know what anything is anymore. And so like I can't explain to I can't easily explain to people how gutting and devastating that is to experience that type of kind of leap in consciousness and be a sentient body, but with like no framework to make sense of existence. And it was really, really, really hard. And when you do research about trauma, especially with religious trauma, I was diagnosed with religious trauma PTSD and ended up in the hospital at one point just trying to recover from all of it because they practice a very severe form of shunning, which if you leave, like you lose everybody. You lose your family, your friends, like you are excommunicated,
Wow.
you're, like a vessel of the devil because you'll turn people away. And so for a long time, I didn't even talk about my story because, just to sit here and talk to you, like can still get me excommunicated. I was never formally like removed. And so all of that to say that there was a lot of trauma to work through. And as I was doing that trauma work and deconstructing from that context, I started reading a lot about trauma integration and how trauma affects the body. So reading books like, The Body Keeps the Score, and other things like that to understand what's happening in my body, what's happening in my brain as I work through this. And as I read and I studied, and Vanderkolk talks about how the medial prefrontal cortex, like the front part of the brain, where your higher awareness lives, is the only part of the brain that can rewire the more older lizard part of your brain that's more reactive. And I knew quite a bit about epigenetics. I read work by people like Mark Woolen, who's looked at epigenetics in Holocaust survivors and how people experience trauma, both that they've experienced personally, but then inherited trauma within the family. And as I'm reading, I'm like, this is evolution. And I don't understand how they don't see that, because if our parents and our grandparents are experiencing things in the environment and they're having reactions to those events and they're making choices, and then the chemicals and switches around their genome affect how their genome, their DNA, turns on and off, and we can inherit those changes, those adaptations from them, that is evolution. And and that means that evolution's happening all the time, in real time, so that each generation can survive the environment that our parents are bringing us into based on how they survived and adapted. And then I looked at neurodivergence and I thought, this is evolution. The brain is evolving in real time. The brain is experiencing an environment of unprecedented complexity and chaos. And so it's not getting rid of all the extra neural pathways and branches that neurotypical brains tend to clip, because the brain is like, I probably need these extra neural pathways to survive the chaos of the environment I'm coming into. Yeah.
Neurodivergent brain disorders.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, like, my mom experienced a lot of trauma as a child. Her mother did too. And, we weren't from my grandmother's generation, like, not, she was born in Jim Crow, Arkansas, not coming, came into this world not so long after slavery. And so, how do I know that those ancestors didn't develop extra neural pathways because they had to constantly live in hypervigilance, had to have enhanced pattern recognition to survive, and like that they are passing those brains with the extra neural pathways onto us so that we can have the same ability to see patterns, to survive, to have extra enhanced foresight and consciousness or cognizance in order to know preemptively how to avoid danger. And so that's what I've been writing about, because upon kind of putting it all together, the genetic side, the DNA side, and then the epigenetic side, and then looking at the work that trauma integration involves and how it rewires the brain and body, which is pretty well documented at this time. Evolution's happening in real time, and the mainstream model of evolution is incomplete. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, when we first started recording, I mean, feel free to keep going.
Yeah.
I don't I don't need to punctuate. I completely agree. I've been talking
Yeah.
about epigenetics a few times. Ever since I heard it, it made sense to me, and so yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Well, it's like you think about it as like a soundboard, right? So, you have the DNA sequence, and each cell in your body, has all the information of your genome, but it doesn't necessarily turn on all of those genes, right? So, like the liver cells don't turn on the genes for muscle because the liver's not a muscle, right? It's not trying to be your musculoskeletal tissue, so it doesn't turn musculoskeletal tissue on. And so the epigenetic piece is kind of similar in that you have different types of epigenetic effects in the body that can affect whether genes are turned on, turned off, or up or down. And they've seen things like that in rats too. They'll do studies, epigenetic studies on rats, and see that, whether a rat, spends extra time grooming and licking its offspring will affect how its stress genes, or what do you call it, how they manifest later on as an
Right.
adult, even when they have their
Hmm.
own children.
Right.
Um,
They can see that they can see the change in their
yes.
genetics from the new
Hmm.
brood, from the new offspring. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, like in the next generation,
generation.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And so I see that. And then, when I realized that I was autistic and also, had ADHD, I looked at my dad and I was like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense now. Like, my dad is totally autistic. Always also kind of a little bit of a rebel, too much of a truth teller for people. But like always right. Like he would make jokes about you that like kind of stung, but it was so accurate that you had to laugh. You couldn't really argue with it, even though it like made you feel salty. And like just when I got when I started realizing that that's what was going on with me, then it made a lot of sense. And a lot of people struggle though with this idea that autism, ADHD, neurodivergent disorders or conditions are evolution because some people experience significant disability from them. And I want to honor that truth because that is the case. I have other people in my family that have autism or that are autistic that have been diagnosed with Asperger's, and they do experience more challenges and more dysfunction than I do. And I want to make sure that people understand that when we talk about evolution, it doesn't, people hear that and they think we're talking about like X-Men and Marvel superheroes. And it's like, just because we're talking about evolution, it doesn't mean that every person who is, um, you know, an iteration of evolutionary divergence is all of a sudden becoming superhuman. If evolution is a feedback loop, which is what my thesis is about, then that means that you have one generation experiencing trauma, chaos, complexity in the environment, the body is adapting, then that's creating changes in the body that affect how the DNA switches on and off. They pass those nervous system changes onto their offspring. That doesn't mean that their offspring is going to perfectly adapt to having inherited those changes. And so one of my hypotheses is that um, currently what we're seeing is that autism is really a manifestation of the prefrontal cortex trying to branch back into the limbic brain and integrate it more deeply than it has been in the average person. And I think that's critical because when I look at the world and I see how politicians behave, I see how the average person behaves, how reactive people are, how
When
susceptible
people
they are
aren't
to
looking, yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
how susceptible they are to fear, fear mongering, how reactive people
How
are.
quickly riots can be started. How,
Yes.
yep.
Yeah, and in how people can be convinced to vote against their own interests. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, what it looks like is that humanity really hasn't evolved past amygdala dominance. That, most brains are running on this, 300 million year old piece of T Rex tissue in the brain that is still stuck in, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and is highly reactive. Whereas the prefrontal cortex, the newer part of the brain, pauses to think and stops and looks at the environment and looks at the system, its inputs, its outputs, and
Yeah.
tries to
And if
like
you
look
think
at it.
about that, just
Yeah.
to interrupt for 1 second, I had one
Yeah.
thought. Psychiatrists always will give you the advice, count to 10, you know, or count to five,
Mm-hmm.
before you respond.
Exactly.
That was you're explaining that in a much better way, but we've always been told, don't respond immediately, don't respond in anger, count to 10, take a moment to think before you respond, because you don't want to say something that you'll regret, or you don't want to say something that
Mm-hmm.
comes from the wrong place.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not explaining it better. That's perfect. That was the greatest thing you could have said because that's exactly right. And it highlights the point that the amygdala as the kind of primary survival switch in the brain is faster than the prefrontal. Oh, it's so funny when it does that. I didn't know that 2 fingers would get me balloons. Like that's interesting. Um, like a lot of jokes there, but I was just like, yeah, like the amygdala. It just came out. I'm like, this is what happens when you.
I love that I love that we could be having this conversation about society, future, and life and death and everything, and then just interrupt it with a bawdy joke. That is right to me.
Well, and like part of it is like too. If I like was a blushing person, I'd be red right now because I'm all hot. But coming from the Jehovah's Witness context, like sexual suppression is a really big deal, and so
I'm
that's
sure.
also part of my trauma. And I also think like sexual repression and sexual trauma are just so pervasive in our society and are also a huge part of most of our socio-political issues. So like yes, I just let it all hang out at this point because I'm like I lived my whole life under suppression and I'm not doing it anymore. But
No,
actually
absolutely.
trying to become a certified sexuality counselor on top of that. But um, that's part of that too. Like I think like the amygdala has been programmed to regard so much as dangerous in our society that like we are just reactive. Like most people are just reactive and reacting from a place of averting threat rather than planning from a strategic systems based position as to what's best for everybody. And so like
Yeah,
you could see it in our policies, in our institutions, everything is based on risk
you got a
aversion
little
rather
fainter.
than say that again.
You got a little fainter. You sounded
Oh,
a little
here.
farther away.
Let's see. Those are not the best
There you go.
headphones.
Yeah, just take the pop. You're gonna get the pop. It's okay.
Okay. Is that better?
That is it.
Okay. Yeah, so but basically I was just looking at it like, wow, we have the theory of evolution wrong. We think we're acting like it's all gene based, but the brain is driving evolution, which makes sense to me because as we were discussing earlier that, if we all came out of the primordial soup, we all started as little feedback loops. And so that means that at some point awareness had to shift enough to say like I don't have to just be an amoeba in soup anymore. And then physical adaptation followed. It doesn't make sense that all of a sudden there were just genetic mutations that led to, crawling out of the water. So there had to be some impulse that said I would like to be on land, right? Like, or what's
Yeah.
this? Or I'm probably more safe if I get in a different environment. And that's not to say that the current theory of evolution is wrong. What I'm saying is that
Right.
it's incomplete, that
The
it's a
missing piece. Yeah.
feedback loop. Yeah, that there is a feedback loop between the organism, its awareness of its environment, how it reacts to its environment, and then how the genes behave in response to all of that awareness and that reaction. And that is supported by our current understanding of epigenetics now. So that's the work I'm trying to do, what I've been trying to write about on Medium, to say, like, we are on an extinction loop right now. If you look at globally, society is collapsing. And that's not inevitable. We can choose to shift it. We don't have to run reality like this. Most of the things that we have used to build reality and create reality are not real. Money is not real. It is a construct. It is a translational device, right? Like the way that we run our
The best we could come
institutions.
up with. That
Yeah,
just to interrupt real quick.
yeah, go for
This
it.
is what I always say. This is what I always say in arguments is that anybody who says, oh well, we should change this, we should change that. The reason everything is where it is because it's the best we could come up with at the current before everything else. So if we
Right.
already tried it, there's probably a reason we changed it. You
Yeah.
know, and money is a perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean to say that is that we yeah, you know what, I had a point and I lost it in my ADHD,
It'll
but
come
yeah,
back.
I mean, yeah, probably not, but yeah, I mean, just basically, we do the best with the information that we have at hand,
Yes.
and with new information from science and from technology and from opportunity, we can make new decisions. I think
Exactly.
that was what it was.
Yeah, exactly. The reason it's hard to make new decisions, and so this is where I see the block is because, you have neurodivergent people who are just like, but this is a stupid way to run things. Obviously, like most people are suffering. Like, yeah, you do have to pay more taxes. You do have to put more back into the collective, but that doesn't mean you won't still live in abundance. But you have most of society running on amygdala logic, which is like, oh my gosh, if I'm taxed more, I have less, and somehow that's going to harm me. And it's like, well, no, because reality is a feedback loop. And so if you don't put money back into the collective that's generating your wealth, the source of your wealth dries up because you're not making that money by yourself. But they don't see reality as a nonlinear system. They just see a pyramid and they're at the top of it.
There's
So
a
you look like you
reason
want to say
that
something.
somebody isn't
Yeah.
showing up at your door with a gun saying, "Hey, I want your stuff," because
Yeah.
we have police.
Right.
There's a reason that when there's a fire, your house doesn't burn down because you can call the fire department.
Yeah.
I mean, but we take all these things for granted because they're right, because they're just there.
Yes.
They should exist, but they're I shouldn't be responsible for that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be
Yeah.
responsible for roads.
It's like there is a like set of collective resources we all benefit from, and you do have to support that. Otherwise, there's no more society for you to make to
Yeah.
create the wealth in. Yeah.
Otherwise, go find your own strip of land.
Yeah, and
Otherwise,
do it
get
all by
out of the
yourself.
U.S.
Exactly. And so like, but what I'm finding is that like most people, even most very
Oh my God! I think
intelligent
I think I
people.
just solved. I think I just solved Trumpism. Just
Yeah,
we need to buy Trump his own piece of land and let him live there and do whatever he wants.
I'm
He
like
would love that.
that's the thing
Okay.
though. So that's the thing. So I have a theory though that like narcissists, and I've had a lot of familial experience with them, like they don't I really believe that in terms of neural evolution, they are at a stage of neural evolution where they are not capable of simulating an internal model of self. Like there's no interiority unless
Not
somebody else
capable.
is reflecting them back
That's
to them.
an important statement, and that's what I keep. It's always nature and nurture, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to. And if we know which it is, then that gives us huge power. And
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that narcissism is nature,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to nurture, but mostly nature, when we can identify that it is literally, just like autism or ADHD, where it causes you to make poor choices or it doesn't allow you to have empathy or take into consideration other people's feelings, then it should be able to be considered and adjusted. And narcissists should not lead people because
No.
they're not leaders. They
No.
only look out for themselves.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm trying to talk about in my essays and my work, to say that like yes, nature is part of it. Nature is part of the feedback loop that creates nurture, and nurture also affects nature. They're not separate. Like
Yeah.
our but the thing is that most of the people leading reality, who are shaping reality, who are in charge of institutions, they think in fragmentation, that everything is separate, and they think in binaries, it's this or that. It's all of it at the same time. None of it is separate. It's a feedback loop, and it's all intertwined, and it's complex. And neurodivergent people are very good at seeing the system and its complexity and how things are intertwined. And then a lot of times you're at jobs or in institutions highlighting that, and it's a threat to people. Why? Because people say, the universe can only reflect back to you what you are, and people are like, oh, that's woo. No, it is neurology. And here's why I say this: because language and belief shapes reality, in the sense that your languages and beliefs are not just thoughts floating around in the ether. They are your actual neural pathways. So your brain's neural pathways are a mental map of your thoughts and your beliefs, your wants, your desires. And if that's the mental map in your brain, you can only create in reality what's in here. So if you're a person who thinks in binary logic, if you're a person who thinks in dog eat dog, me versus them, you're going to create policies and institutions that reflect that neurology in your brain. And so that's why everything is a mess, because the people in charge are at an earlier evolutionary stage. And I don't mean that to be insulting, to say like, oh my gosh, neurodivergent people are so much better. But evolution is working towards trying to keep us from going extinct, and reality is collapsing. So I'm asking people to sit with me in this space and not hear this as a supremacy, and hear it as survival.
And you
Hear
know
it as
what?
survival.
I had somebody else on the podcast early, one of my first guests, who said something perfect. We were talking about neurodivergency, and she also talked about man versus woman. And she says, it's silly for an apple being mad that an orange is an orange.
Mm-hmm.
They're two different things, and you need to be okay with that. You need to say you're not an apple, you're an orange. Women are
Yeah.
women, men are men, and neurodivergents are neurodivergents, and neurotypicals are neurotypicals. And if the whole world was made of neurodivergence, we would all have brilliant ideas, but most of them wouldn't be flushed out because,
Yeah.
we would have lots of ideas. We would have all the ideas, but we wouldn't have people to build things. We wouldn't have people to create things, to actually go
Mm-hmm.
out, because that's me personally. Because
Yeah.
I can think of ideas, but I am not a person of action. That
Yeah.
is the neurodivergent, uh, exchange. That's the neurodivergent. You know, what's the term I'm looking for? Trade off. That's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
I love that you said that, because so I'm a certified Clifton Strengths coach, and usually people that are in Fortune 500 companies are familiar with that. But I love it as a methodology to work with clients outside of the professional context, because it's a positive psychology program where they look at your top talents, and their whole philosophy is like, if you have a team at work, don't make people work on things that they don't enjoy working on. If you know that they hate spreadsheets, don't make them the spreadsheet person. Pair them with somebody who loves spreadsheets, and let them do the thing they're good at, and then let somebody else do the thing they're good at. And that's also why society is a mess. Like, we're not optimizing for people working in spaces where they would do best. And you're right, like, a lot of neurodivergent people are more heady. Like, they are not necessarily people who want to be on the ground in the execution stage. Some are, but not all. Some
Yeah,
I'm
I
more of
mean,
a like
you don't
ideation
want to be doing the
person.
same thing for years as well. You
Yeah.
want to be able to have changes. You want to be able to be presented with new challenges. Because I saw something the other day, and I'll mention. I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's probably a famous thing or something. I don't know, but it was a ADHD. It was a TED talk on ADHD, and I mentioned this on my other podcast. It's Kristen Presner, and it's a TED
Kristen
talk. It's
Presner.
only like
Okay.
14 minutes long, and
Mm-hmm.
it was about how this neurotypical mom had the neurodivergent, the ADHD dad and two kids.
Mm-hmm.
And She, was head of HR at a big company and everything. She would come home and try to apply these tactics to them, and they just wouldn't work. And she'd get frustrated, and she tried to mold them in her image, and they would just get annoyed. And she finally figured out how to work within the system, in that, ADHD attacks a problem at hand. ADHD puts things off. I always had that problem when I had an assignment due. It was always the
Mm-hmm.
night before. I've had like 2 weeks to do it, and I haven't done a damn thing because I've just been putting it off, because I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. And then the night that it's due, I'm like, oh shit, I got to do that assignment. And then my
Yeah.
mom's like, why the hell didn't you start it? And so she'll sit me at the computer, and then she taught me one of the best things my mom taught me is not to get hung up on the title. I would always I can remember sitting at the word processor, okay,
Yeah.
before computers. I can remember sitting at the word processor, staring at the title and being like, "Oh, what do I want to name it?" And she's just like, "Just start writing it, then you can get the title from the subject matter."
Yeah.
And that was a huge help to me. That doesn't come to me as my primordial neurodivergent soup. It's just, I need to tackle this before I can move on.
Yeah.
I have to focus on this task. This needs to be done. And then being told, it's okay to move on, then that's, and then, my pathway always remembered that, even though my memory, is very bad. That's always stuck in my brain. And every time I've had to write something, I always, if I don't have the title immediately, I am able to start writing it. And it's sometimes it's about learning what makes the person, you know fly. It's about putting the
Mm-hmm.
person, like you said, in the best position, so that you can capitalize on their skills and strongest attributes.
Mm-hmm.
It seems
Exactly.
like a no-brainer.
Exactly. For me, I just feel like ADHD is largely an alignment problem. I have sat really long and hard and thought about why certain things bother me and why I put off certain things. And when it really came down to it, it's because most of the things that I put off doing, I some subconscious or not so subconscious part of me thinks that they're stupid, and that's why I don't want to do it. And so, like, I'll give you an example.
What she says is there's no reward. Come to think of
Yeah,
it, that's what she talks about. Is it's about the
there's no
immediate
reward.
reward,
Yeah.
the dopamine that the ADHD brain wants, because we don't, apparently ADHD brains don't create enough dopamine, or starve dopamine, or don't have dopamine. I don't know.
I
That
don't know. They
doesn't.
say that, but like I feel like ADHD brains, and like thinking about this from an evolutionary perspective, that they don't create enough
Yep.
dopamine because we're too busy always being made to do the wrong things. And so, like, here's an
Mhm.
example of
That
what
is
I mean
true.
by this. Like, so I quit grad school. I really wanted to go to become a counselor. I wanted to help people, but like, there's so many reasons like why Western like psychotherapy is problematic, and that's a whole other like 2 hour conversation, right? But like, I would have a paper due, same thing, and I would just put off sitting down and writing it. Why? Because I can't just sit and write whatever the hell I want to. I have to every 5 sentences stop and look up when some stupid reference was written by whom, where, and which publishing house. So then, like, my train of thought is totally derailed every time I need to write something where I'm in flow because I have to stop and like follow this ridiculous methodology. And for me, I'm like in the age of the internet when everything is moving towards light speed processing, and I should just be able to mention the work of the person that I'm talking about and point you at their work, and you can click and go find it. Like, you're making me apply formatting standards from what, in technological, age is 500 years ago, for when we had physical libraries where people needed all that information to go find the source. You don't need all that now. And so, like, why do I have to sit here and try to write, a 6,000 word paper with APA in text citations when like that is a relic of the past and it's a construct. And if we're being really honest, it is a form of epistemic gatekeeping also. And so I just
Exactly
that
what I
is
was thinking.
yeah,
Yep.
that's where like I feel like ADHD
Not the
is not
epistemic part, but the gatekeeping.
yeah, it's just like it's many forms of gatekeeping at once because it's like
Mhm.
we're filtering people for those who will conform to our conventions. And if you won't conform to our conventions, you can't be part of the in group. And that's just one of them. And so from like an equity perspective, from a neurodivergent thinker's perspective, like it is just absolutely one of the most incoherent processes like I've ever experienced. And my brain just fundamentally is like, no, this is dumb. I'm not doing this. And so like if I have to do this to be part of your in group, I'm gonna go do my work outside. I will publish it on Medium and let people read it. And my work still has references in it. I still like say who I'm citing. I just don't put it in the format that you're requiring because I don't have time for that. And
Yeah,
so
I was impressed by your references on Medium.
thank you. And so I'm just saying, like, that is one of those examples where an ADHD person will really, really struggle, but they're
Yeah,
struggling with a construct.
yeah.
They're not struggling with reality.
It's not, yeah. It's nothing important. It's simply
No.
the rules that they've made, and it's
Yeah.
always the rules. It's always
Yeah.
just bullshit rules that were created by somebody before. And you said it. You said it. And I wanna quote this. This is I believe I read this from you. You where is it? I took so many pictures of this thing.
Oh, yeah. Take your time.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't like I don't like to have to edit. I never edit, so this will be in the podcast. Um,
That's fine.
what was it? It was about. Okay, I sent it to somebody else today, and he was an idiot with it. But got into political debate with an old friend who's screaming at these. God. Okay, no, not that one. Where is that? It was about the. Oh, I wish I could get it. It was you mentioned um now it's gone now.
Is it the part about ADHD in the from the article about evolution?
No, it was about the people who came before. Oh, that's right. It was in. I wanted to share this with you. That's right. It was in a book I'm
Okay.
reading, Red Rising. Have you ever read the Red Rising series?
No.
The
I have to
good
write that down
sci-fi
too.
series that my fiance turned me on to.
Okay. Red
Where is
Rising.
it? Here we go. Okay, that's done. Take a couple pictures of that. Should have been the first one. Bleh. I did send that to him. No, that was earlier. Here we go. Finally, our world's made us what we are, and all the
Mm-hmm.
pain we suffer is to fix the folly of those who came before, who shaped the world in their image and left us the ruin of their feast.
That's it in a nutshell. And that's great.
Isn't that just friggin' awesome? I read that and I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's literally in their image and so my work is literally saying take it a step further. It's literally in the image of their neurology. And neurodivergence, our brains trying to evolve into the neurology that can fix what those who came before us left because it doesn't work with almost 9 billion people on the planet. And like yeah, the planet is abundant and it keeps producing, but there's people talk about, no, you can extract as much as you want, and other people are like, no, it's finite. It's the planet is capable of producing infinitely at a finite rate. You cannot exceed the rate of extraction that is possible of the planet, right? But like the most difficult thing or to get around in terms of being able to change is that people who have made the world what it is have made it in their image. It is literally the externalization of their ego, their policies, their procedures, their like why can't we switch to solar energy? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like point glass at the sun and boom, like we're good. Get rid of dams. I live in Vegas. Like let the water flow back through here. It's beautiful here. It would be even more beautiful if the water wasn't dammed up. Like you can harness the sun. We don't need to pull oil out of the earth. But for those oil barons,
My
like they're go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I
For
was
the
saying
oil
their
barons.
their identity their identity is built on being the oil man. And so it's like,
Well,
well, if
their
I'm to
identity built
shift,
on protecting their investment,
yeah.
protecting their future. I just had this argument with somebody the other day who was talking about AI, and I'm like, yeah, you see this now because it affects you, because it
Mhm.
threatens you. But go back to when we didn't have cars. You don't think the first car threatened people who sold horses? You don't
Exactly.
think the telephone threatened people who were sending telegrams and all the telegram companies went out of business? You don't think, look at Kodak.
Mhm.
Company that one of the biggest companies in the world, and they declared bankruptcy in 2012, I think it was, because they refused to go digital,
Mhm.
because they refused to adapt.
Mhm.
And if you don't adapt, you die. You wither
Exactly.
away, and so uh, I'm going to read out my exit here, and then
Yeah.
we will go to the second part where we can just chat here. I just went exactly how I expected it. I absolutely loved everything you said. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
So I wrote this out so I wouldn't, so I'd say it right. The only thing I want to make sure to say that I believe I can add to our conversation is that your brain and ideas and concepts were nearly lost due to ignorant, selfish, violent people. What better way to describe a cult? You
Mhm.
distance yourself from them and did not take what they said to heart, and look what you've achieved. You not only inspire me in your thought provoking ideas and your dizzying intellect, but in reinforcing that my concepts have a place too. My sign off, if this hasn't already been covered, is a plea to every neurodivergent mind out there that hears this podcast. You are the mirror that reflects society on itself. People
Mhm.
hate mirrors, but as Elizabeth so eloquently puts, when a brain loses its mirrors, it spirals into pathology. When it accepts them, it heals.
Mhm.
This makes so much sense, and I hope it motivates some people out there who feel less than, because I know I have. Take pride in who you are to your core, and don't let a broken society tell you to not be who you are. Follow Elizabeth, consider her concepts, and if you reach the same conclusion I did, take pride in your neurodivergency instead of the false narrative that we are lesser. That's just a fear from society knowing they failed and the last gasp attempts to cling on to their comfortable dysfunction. I refuse to allow them their delusion any longer. Who's with me? Elizabeth, there's no other way to say this. I feel like there was a cosmic attraction to me creating my podcast and having you on. I cannot overstate the depth of respect I have for you and your intelligence. You should and hopefully will be interviewing with much more widespread and credible voices than me. Neil deGrasse Tyson comes to mind first. Balls in your court, Neil. As always, thanks so much for watching, and feel free to check out the after party episode Elizabeth and I will record if she still has time. Until our next conversation, Autistic Pod, take care, everyone.